I'd like to thank CPL Recruitment and Bank of Ireland for sponsoring this event. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's guest, Hugh O'Donnell. So Hugh, before we go into the amazing story about building up Kentz as CEO from a Clonmel company to a $2 billion company with 10,000 employees in 36 countries, could we just have a bit of background about your own upbringing, if you like? Were you a Meccano kid?
I've never been asked that question before, but ironically I was actually, and not by choice. My mother bribed me with pieces of Meccano for years until it worked, and then she figured out that if I did all that she'd get me what I was supposed to do, whether she needed to do it or not. But I was actually, and it sort of, my dad was an engineer, so I guess maybe that's maybe why I fell into that. So
because I know your initial degree was in mechanical engineering, and I thought maybe the Meccano thing might have happened. And was there a history of sort of entrepreneurship within the O'Donnell family? Or
I'm not sure back in my dad's generation if the word entrepreneurship fully meant the same thing, but like entrepreneurship today is about disruption, differentiation, risk-taking. Back then I think it was about survival and running your own business. And my dad had his own business. He was an engineer and he did a mechanical business. And I'm very happy to say that he's still alive today and running his mechanical business at 78 years of age. And I guess I learned a lot from him in growing up. Before I went to university, before I did anything, he brought me in and got my hands in the nettles doing welding, pipe fitting, you know, working hard. And, you know, you figured out what working for a living actually meant.
Great, great. And then when you eventually went to college, you started in University of Limerick, doing mechanical engineering, am I right? I think it's interesting when I look at your education, and we did a quick chat last week, after getting your Bachelor's of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering in UL, you later went back to college and did an MBA in Surrey University, and then you went on to do a psychology degree in behavioural psychology, organisation and behaviour.
Correct.
Is that right?
You're doing great.
So I'm just interested, that's an interesting combination of mechanical engineering, you know, MBA and then the psychology. Did those three complementary...
Definitely, I'd recommend it for everybody.
Did they contribute to what you went on to do in terms of building up a big organisation and all the people skills and maybe psychological insights and stuff one needs to do that successfully? I mean, did you, as you learned those three things, realise that those three were very complementary of each other? Or were they just passions that you had at the time?
I think retrospectively I realised they were very complementary. I didn't plan to go and do all of these things and say, well, that's my master plan, I'm going to do that, then I'm going to do this. I think if you look at millennials today, they all do a primary degree and a master's. It's become the new norm, and I think it's great, especially when the two are so complementary. And I had the pleasure of living and working in Asia for a number of years in 1999 for 2003. And that's when I figured out about culture and psychology, and I said, oh, I'll just do a doctorate in this and just get it done with, as you do. And I learned a lot about people and cultures and respect, because that drives everything in this world. And running a global organization at the time, it helped a lot to rationalize how things worked in different places. And I suppose the key thing when you do psychology is to tell nobody you've done it, because otherwise they look at you and they think differently. So yeah, we keep that one under wraps.
They think you're analysing their every move, is it?
Exactly.
Body language and
so yeah, send you into a trance or something.
So obviously the courses kind of jumped ahead and you did them through your career. So when you left UL, was Anglo-American your first job that you applied for?
Yeah, I graduated in 1987 from UL. It was NIHE back then. I'm sure not most people here wouldn't remember that.
I remember.
You do, but there wouldn't be many more. Back then there was no jobs here, so I applied for a job in the network, and this job, Anglo-American, came up. I went for the interview. I said, whereabouts in America am I going to? And they said, young man, Anglo-American is an African mining corporation. You're being posted to Standerton. I said, which state of America is that in? They said, no, it's a little town 200 miles east of Johannesburg, and that's where you're going to be based. So I took it, and I went on a 4-year deal with Anglo-American Corporation. My first job was, I went on this 6-month training course. They taught you everything you needed to know about working in Africa and learning different languages. And after 2 months, I was given a call to say, the chief underground engineer has been transferred, and you, at 22 years of age, are the only qualified engineer we have on the bench. You're on, you got a jersey, this is your team. And I had 6 people working for me. They were all like the front and second row of the Springboks. They spoke Afrikaans, no English. Fortunately, the only training course I had done at that stage was speaking Afrikaans, so I had some language, but I had to figure out how to make that work. And fortunately, having worked with my dad in engineering and construction, it helped a lot. So I figured out what the word credibility meant very early in my career.
Great.
And that's what kicked me off.
Baptism of fire.
Definitely. Another one.
So 22, no pressure. So over those 4 years then, how did that go? What sort of experience did you gain, and did it kind of give you an idea of the path you wanted to take?
I was 22 years of age. What plans would you have? You were thrown in the deep end, sink or swim, learn life skills, learn to operate in the boardroom. I was working underground half the day, the other half a day doing reports. You learn a lot, things you don't learn at university. But again, it was never part of a master plan. I'm going to connect with this and connect with that. It wasn't until the 4th year that I was on an airplane on my flight back from Ireland, and I picked up one of these Aer Lingus magazines, and it said, there's this beautiful picture of this Caribbean sunset and turquoise blue water, and at the bottom it said, join Kentz and see the world. So I said, oh, I'll have a bit of that. And they had an office in South Africa, so I met with them, thinking they would be a ticket for me back home, back to Ireland in time, and grow with them as an Irish company that were international. And I met with them, and I signed a deal with them, but a month later, in 1991.
So at that stage, they were established internationally. They started in Clonmel, but they were starting the road of successful global. Yeah,
they had operations in Africa, throughout the Middle East, some contracts in Asia. They had been in and out of Australia. Obviously Ireland was important, but they probably had about 6 or 7 countries of operation. If you looked at their portfolio, you thought they were all over the world, but it was a great starting place for me. My first experience with them was different. I had come out of a big mining corporation. I had a big fancy office, had a big fancy car. And I joined this company called Kentz, and I thought it was great. And I went to the office to meet my first boss, who was a Geordie guy. And they had just won a project down near Cape Town on Mossel Bay. And I was just married, and Finola, my wife, was pregnant with our first child. And we were moving from this African mining town to this big city of Johannesburg. And I arrived at their offices, and the HR lady said, oh, the guy that's hiring you wants to talk to you. So and I got on the phone, and he's down in this Mossel Bay site, which is like 2,000 miles away on the coast. And he said, get your fucking ass down here to Mossel Bay, lad. That was my welcome to Kentz moment. So that's how it started.
So how does a company from Clonmel become a world leader in the space? What was unique about their offering in the oil and gas industry that made them so successful ultimately?
Like every company needs a USP, but I think they had 2. One was this automation, instrumentation at the time, how to automate industrial facilities, engineer, design, and roll these out globally. And they built relationships with big engineering houses who didn't have that skill, and that was their portal and platform to differentiate themselves. But once they got out into these international projects, it was their Irishness that differentiated them even better, because us Irish abroad, we work really well. We have this enormous tolerance for ambiguity that other cultures don't have. that we can deal with chaos more than others do. And from my experiences, when there's chaos, there's cash. And but you have to get yourself into the chaos. Like we often said, there's no problem being on a problem project as long as you didn't cause the problem. So there's a lot of Irishness about that, but your Irishness won't get you into the opportunity. So the two twin-track USP is what really propelled Kentz into all these places. And at the time it was known as MF Kent. So it only became Kentz in '94.
They added a Z to it.
Yeah.
Exotic, was it?
The CEO was passing the Hertz sign in the car park and he saw it. He says, we'll change the name to that. No, there was an actual buyout plan. There was an MBO and they had to change the name. They bought out the Kent family in 1989 and they had 5 years to change the name, and everybody knew the company as Kentz with an S, but they just changed it to a Z.
So that's really interesting, the Irishness thing. So before we kind of go back into the whole Kent and your journey, so do you think we're like social chameleons internationally, whereas a British or an American guy, they're very British or American, we can just duck and dive with the circumstances? Is that what you mean? We're like, when you say
definitely.
Tolerance for ambiguity, that's interesting.
Tolerance for ambiguity, it's like it's one of those psychological terms.
Okay.
But it means that we can deal with stuff better than other cultures, I think. That's my experience. From working in cultures that are very rigid and structured, when there is chaos, they need some group to come in and fix things. And I think having that chameleon-like attitudes, behaviors, can-do attitude, obviously you still have values to live by in how you do your business, but I think being able to have that agility and flexibility that customers need and want, then...
Poor little colonised island.
Yeah, you could play the Irish card, and we used to play it a lot, and it worked. But it was genuine as well.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And obviously, over the years, then you worked in Russia as well as Africa, and you know, is it important then to be able to quickly sort of understand the local cultures and what makes them tick and what you can and can't do? I mean, you can obviously offend people very easily if you do the wrong thing and so on. How, to what extent did that affect your success over the years? You know, I mean.
Well, I suppose before we go on to going to Russia, I had to transition through the African organization first, because I joined this company, and remember, I'm catapulted down to Mossel Bay as an engineer, and I'm a mechanical engineer by profession, as we all know, from University of Limerick, and Kentz was an electrical company, and I was afraid to tell them actually I was a mechanical engineer for the first few months in case they'd figure me out, but they gave me an opportunity to start up the mechanical business in Africa, which I did, and that grew substantially throughout different countries and different clients. And in '97, when I was 30 years of age, I was made the managing director of the African business. I'm still in Africa after 6 years trying to make my way back to Ireland. And because I was successful in different parts of the business, I got that assignment. And 3 years later, I was made the group CEO. And when I did that, I acquired 10% of the company in that transition. And the reason I did it is the company had enormous potential, but it had gone through enormous transformation, where it had gone from a company of revenues of about 500 million Irish punts at the time, back to about 100. And because of challenges and problems the company had, and I was asked to come and rebuild the company. And that set me off on a journey to go to lots of different countries and take that differentiating brand and get it into different customers and work with clients and grow the value chain and all these lovely things you learn at Masters in Business School. And that's when we started getting involved in lots of different cultures, in lots of different countries, and that's when I had done my doctorate as well in psychology, so that helped to understand how to work in all these places. But it still never prepare you for them.
No. So there must have been, I mean, it's an amazing story, but there must have been a lot of speed bumps along the way. Like, from a cultural point of view, can you share any maybe mess-ups that happened, the stuff that went wrong on you, you know, that you had to fix?
Oh, there was lots of those, yeah. I think along the way, I mean, you learn from your mistakes. We are, in the words of Reagan Bowman, only human after all, and humans make mistakes, and it's just a matter of recognizing that and learning from that. And if you're growing at a certain rate, you make mistakes. I suppose the first biggest mistake we made that I can remember, which was catastrophic and potentially even more catastrophic, was as you grow at a certain rate, we suffer from this association bias that your success in the past will get you success in the future. And we tendered a project in the Middle East for a scope of work that we weren't really qualified to do, but we thought we could do it. And we didn't really know what we were letting ourselves in for. And after about 6 months into the project, we suddenly realized we were about 20 million out of pocket. And in those days, 20 million was a lot of money. In these days, every day, 20 million is a lot of money. But it would have seriously hurt our profit figures. And at this stage, there was talks of maybe even listing on the stock market. And that wouldn't look very well. The good news is we were ready to fix the problem. This was a project where we had caused the problem. So we were fortunate that our customer needed the facility because so many other facilities had to be built and designed on the back of that. And we were fortunate that he engaged with us to enter into a series of bonus and incentive arrangements to finish by a certain schedule, which we did, and we made the money back. And it became a massive learning without the massive cost. And from then, I think we understood the word risk in a much different way.
So they let you enter, they let you win the tender knowing you'd gone way under what it would cost you to deliver it?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
So maybe that's why they felt good about giving us the incentive.
But you turned a problem into an advantage, but when you saw the element of the time factor that they had to get the thing delivered, and they used what, incentives to
I think if you're involved in providing a service or a product that's critical to any customer, then you're in the value chain. Now, if you delay that, it's a big problem. If you can shorten it, it's a massive differentiator. We figured that out later in life with that same customer who took us to lots of different countries because we fixed the problem, because we were able to understand their whole value chain and shortening that value chain and their service line and giving them certainty and credibility in finishing projects. That was a big differentiator for us as we grew.
What were, as you rose through management and became the CEO and grasped that opportunity and obviously wisely invested, getting that 10%, skin in the game obviously makes a big difference in terms of, I presume it makes a big difference in terms of motivation, having skin in the game, yeah?
Oh, definitely, because it changes the perspective. If and the board or the chairman would be acutely aware of that. At the time, the company pre-listing was 80% with the Malaysian investor and 20% myself and another partner of mine by the name of Noel Kelly, who's a farming specialist from Tipperary. And it's great to have farmers on your team because they can do anything. Like they can change Massey Ferguson, gearboxes from the age of about 6. So you imagine them taken with you globally. They're amazing people. So having people from a farming background with degrees, with skill sets was a big part of that success as well. But going back to your skin in the game, it's not like you wear it on your shirt, but every decision you make, you have that in mind. So it's a big thing. It's
a big one. And then becoming the CEO, what particular skills and how did your management style change, or did it change being a CEO as opposed to being a people manager on the way up? What does a CEO have to do that other managers don't?
I think the CEO means different things to different people. I had gone through this process where I was selected by the board, not that I was looking for the job, and because they were going to go outside initially, and because they wanted to transform the company, but instead they were convinced now they should get this 35-year-old who was working in South Africa to lead the company. And I arrived back to Ireland to meet the management team, who were an agglomeration of executives from all over the world. It was about 10 countries at the time. And I suddenly realized, even though I had the job, the interview was just beginning. And then I had to prove myself. And I was actually asked a question at dinner one night after they got rid of all the other customers and cleared out the restaurants and kept ordering the drinks. They locked the door and they said, why should we be led by you? So that's when you click in, and we have this amazing brain. We've got these two little amygdalas which sense danger and fear. And they must have kicked in then, because I remember standing up on the chair and unscripted professed the opportunity that we had collectively as a team to grow this business, collectively share in the spoils. I was the only shareholder around the table, except for my partner Noel Kelly, but that changed later. And at the time there were 10 independent silos because of what had happened in the past. And my job was to unlock the synergy amongst all the silos, to create teamwork, to create sharing, to create opportunity, to transform a company that was doing $100 million in revenue to something that could potentially be a lot more. So no training really sets you up for that. It's a bit of training, a bit of psychology, and amygdalas kicking in.
What year was that it was turning over 100 million?
That was 2000.
2000. And you were just installed as CEO around then, was it?
That's when I took over as CEO, yeah, 2000.
And within how many, was it 2-3 years then that you went for an IPO?
Yeah, we went for IPO in 2007. And along the way we had a lot of growth and progression. And we started to unlock these silos and get people to share. And you think about culture as this series of events that you can influence, which it is, retrospectively. At the time, it's just chaos. And staying ahead of chaos is what you're trying to do. Building processes and organization capacity and unlocking latent issues within that as you grow. And we transitioned from being a series of 10 countries and 10 pockets to regions, to global business units, where we unlocked all the things that were similar and created a global P&L for 3 main units. And within 2 years, we doubled the company's revenues from, at the time, about 250 to 500 million up by 2005.
Brilliant. Great story. Just go back to the ICO. So it's 2007, you know, the world's falling apart. It's economic down, you know. How come the ICO went so well? Or how come you choose that time when companies like GPA, you know, had less success and stuff? Was the timing planned? Was it the progression of the breaking down of these silos and the releasing of all the synergy and the increased turnover? Did you just feel there was a momentum there that the time was right in spite of economics?
So by 2007 we were approaching $650 million in revenue. So we were growing on average at 35% a year, which is great. And we were backfilling the organizational capacity to do that, the brand, the recognition, the momentum. And let's just say some of the shareholders were looking for an exit plan, and that was one of the options that was considered was an IPO, initial public offering listed on the stock market. And 2007 was decided to be the year. And as you point out, 2007 was a precursor to what happened in 2008 and 2009 and so on. And we didn't know that. Nobody really knew that at that stage, but we went along and we did our IPO and we decided to list in London. We engaged with bankers and lawyers and accountants and lawyers and bankers for the accountants and for the lawyers, and there was just one big happy family spending lots of money for the whole of 2007 preparing for this IPO. And we got to the end of 2007 and the investment bank said, look, it's not a very good time to do an IPO in November, we'll delay it to January. So middle of January we had prepared everything. We were going out to list the company because you have to then go out and sell it, the whole story to investors. It's not like you decide to list, you do loads of stuff, you push a button, you're listed. There's this piece at the end which is called selling the company to investors. And we had to go out on a roadshow middle of January, scheduled for 2 weeks. A PE of 12 had been discussed with the investment bank. Price earnings ratio multiple of 12 times profit, which was pretty good. And that was a discount to the sector average in oil and gas services. Because by this stage, Kentz had grown up from being a construction company to an electrical contractor to oil and gas services. you know, in terms of the range of services it did. Plus, it was a much better PE. But when we actually went out and saw investors, given where the market was trending, the PE was 9. That was the deal, take it or leave it, which was a different market cap. But the market cap, we eventually got the IPO away 2 weeks later. It won the IPO of the Year award that year because it was the only IPO that happened. and we all know what happened in 2008 and 2009. Fortunately, our growth revenue pattern and profits continued to grow 30 to 40% a year. And our peers didn't because they were much bigger, we were much smaller. It's much easier to grow when you're small. And we shot up to revenues of about 800 million by 2008. And the margins were better than the peer average. And within 4 years, we were up to a PE of 15, which was the top of the sector because we were growing the fastest with the best margin, which are kind of key metrics when you're in a sector when investors are looking at it. So it was an amazing journey. There's lots of stories about how we got there and lots of stories about how we stayed there. We enjoyed a very good run on the stock market, and we met with investors every quarter, shared our stories, shared our backlog, shared our pipeline, and they kept investing in us and we kept growing and they kept getting better returns. So it was great fun and a great success.
Brilliant. So you mentioned awards there. You won CEO for IPO of the Year with the London Stock Exchange 2008. You also won the UL Alumni Businessman of the Year 2008. And then you won the Ernst & Young International Entrepreneur of the Year 2009. How important are awards and recognition by your peers and so on? How much do you value that?
I'm not so much about the value of the reward, but I think motivation theory tells us that the two biggest motivators for people is achievement and recognition. So, and getting awards validates that. And if nothing else, it validates that. And I think to share that with a team of people is critically important. And I think in the case of the IPO, that whole team that sat around that table that did the interview that allowed me to pass all became shareholders in a sort of an investment ESOP arrangement along with 50 other managers. So that recognition that you were involved in the process and the achievement of what you've done, the reward came in the IPO. And it wasn't scripted in that same way, but retrospectively, that's what happened.
Brilliant. Fantastic story. So as you stepped down then from Kentz and the success of the IPO and so on, your next venture then was Ingenium. Can you tell us a bit about Ingenium and how it came about and what you guys do?
I think in 2012 I finished with Kentz as CEO. The company went then sold to SNC-Lavalin for in excess of the market cap at the time, which was about $2.3 billion. And I had to stay on for 2 years as a consultant. And during that time I worked and helped them win contracts. I wrote some books under a different name, more fictional thrillers. We're selling them there for 3 for tenner. I enjoyed the time off, but in my mind I was crafting what next.
So that's a complete deviation from what you're doing.
Just a slight detour, yeah. I'm passionate about the English language, passionate about fun, entertainment. So, well, during that 2 years I also thought about what's next, and I was fortunate that I had made some money. And I wanted to invest in lots of different things. And we have an investment company called MacX3 Investments, which is invested in lots of startups and lots of other equities and funds around the world. But that's not my job. That's run separately. And I'm invested in other companies that are involved in the oil and gas space and similar businesses to before. But the most rewarding part for my role in my journey with Kentz was building the organizational capacity, which is people. And everything we did was organic. and every growth we had was organic. So our investment in talent and people to run operations as we grew from basically to 14,000 people, and we had to grow leadership and strategy and accountability, and it was accelerated learning. And we hired about 60 people every year in graduates. We put them on extensive training programs. We took a lot of existing leaders, we put them on training programs, and we got them involved and engaged in the strategy. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to be able to offer that to companies back in Ireland? So that's how Ingenium started, and that's what Ingenium does. It runs a range of leadership development programs for SMEs and high potential startup companies. It runs strategy sessions for companies to get them to unlock their ideas and get everybody invested in the change process, and helps them map out and implement their strategies. It's all about human and organizational performance, which is passionate for me. And that passion, I was fortunate then to start working back with a lot of energy and resource companies. So we're running loads of programs with major international energy companies using some of the similar ideas about human and organizational performance. And that's taken us into 12 countries in Ingenium. And we're growing rapidly. And we're here in Limerick on Hartstone Street as our head office.
Brilliant.
And I've got some of my team here tonight to support me. So,
great.
And most importantly, it's lots of fun.
I see you've got clients like you've a combination of local Irish HPSU clients like Action Point and Homs and Kirby Electrical and some great local companies, and then you've got your first employer, Anglo-American, is it? And Exxon Mobil and stuff. Are you offering similar services to both cohorts, or is it completely different?
At the end of the day, what's common is you're dealing with people and people's development and people's realization about themselves. I go back to my point about humans. You know, we are humans, and we have different biases that drive us to make decisions in different ways, different cultures, different hierarchies, and all of that revolves around people being realizing what that is. So we do a lot of programs which is just an awareness of who you are. And once you know who you are, then you can apply that to lots of things. Leadership, strategy, safety, development programs, lots of things. So there's a lot of common threads with what we're doing with all of our clients. And obviously working in the local market here, you know, we're obviously working to the requirements of that market in terms of the commercial realization of what that is, and supporting customers, and then working internationally. It's a different platform we work from, but there's a lot of commonality in terms of what we do.
Great. I mean, it's amazing to be able to use the 28 years of experience to apply that now to companies here. Just come back quickly before we get to Q&As, a couple of quick ones. From an investor's point of view, when you see a startup, early stage startup maybe, pitching to you, how important relatively is the team versus the product or the idea?
Obviously they're both important, and one can't go without the other. But if the product was brilliant and the team wasn't, I couldn't go. If the team is brilliant and the product's okay, I'd probably go. Okay. So I invest, and our vision is investing in people. So I have to follow that, and that's what I do, I guess. And we invest with people we enjoy and that are passionate about what they do. Obviously, there are criteria in terms of their investment and commitment, but that's our motto.
How important then, when you're talking with startups, how important is the pitch and how well they can articulate the problem they're solving and their solution succinctly? Yeah,
it is very important for me, because I'm OCD when it comes to English and presentations, as my team know. But not everybody has had the pleasure of being trained in all these things. But I think it's critically important for people to practice their pitch. You know, the elevator pitch of being able to say something in a minute, or if you can't, sell it to one of your kids, probably won't be able to sell it to a board of executives. There's a lot of learning you can do to communication. So I think it's critically important that you have the context and the content in the right proportions.
So the fire's gone out. So on cue. So I'll ask you just what I always ask our guests, just finishing before we go to Q&A. What would be your top 3 tips, Hugh, for early stage startups in this room?
I think it's, if you're an early stage startup and you're on the next milestone, whatever that is, probably an investment round. Everything should be focused on that and making that everything that's required, stakeholders associated or linked with that, are considered in your plan, and just putting all your energy and effort into that next milestone, what it is, would be one. Maybe the team, that you can't do anything without your team. You might have served very well on your own to now, but you need to look at your team, whether that team is full-time, part-time, because you'll need it for capacity and your investor will need it to see how you're going to do it. And I think the most important thing then is just scalability. That you have to see where the scalability is, and in fact you need to look at that very early, because if you get to stage 3 and you can't figure out the scalability thing, you have a problem. And there's various ways scalability comes into play, so I think it's a matter of researching that, getting the time, and not expecting that it's all going to happen at once, but that you have the steps and plans, because scalability happens in different ways.
Brilliant. 3 very wise tips. Thank you very much. So you, as our 25th Startup Grind guest, we won't tell the other 24. We think you're the best so far. We really appreciate you joining us, and so I'd like to give a big round of applause to Hugh O'Donnell.
Thank you very much for having me.